Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brygger, and if you're new here, I really hope I'll earn your subscription today. This is the third video where we're going to paint a faction from Heroes of Might and Magic, the board game. And today it is Rampart. We have a city, we have 2 heroes and 7 faction units. And some of them is quite big, so we better get started. Okay, let's jump right into it. First, I will prime it with this matte black from the Army Painter. I use my airbrush to prime. You can use rattle cans or you can even use brush on primer, but I'm using an airbrush. I'll start darkening from below with this matte black. And to make a centerful highlight, I'll use this matte gray where I will spray it from top down to make the light effect of the centerful highlight. And to enhance the light effect, I will use this matte white, carefully sprayed from the top as the miniatures just stand there on my table. The primer is now dry and I will use this matte white to dry brush and make all the details pop. I use an old makeup brush for the dry brushing. Dry brushing is one of the steps I really enjoy, priming all my miniatures and getting them ready to get some color, because it's very satisfying to see all the details emerge from the surface of the miniature. Now that everything is primed and ready, we can start with a dark tone on all the walls on this Rampart town. For the terrain around the town, I will use this algae green as a base. This is a speed paint. Rampart is a good alignment town, with Ranger and Druid class heroes. The Druid and Ranger hero classes are native to Ramparts, which are built by creatures in allied defense of the unspoiled wilderness regions of Ilrathia. To paint the dirt on the terrain, I will use this sand golem speed paint. And some ruddy fur for all the woodwork. This really shows how Rampart is one with the nature. They also use the natural materials of their surroundings. All the buildings on top of the stonework, including the watchtowers, are made out of wood. The roof is also made out of natural materials, and for that I will use this Fire Drake speed paint. The speed paint is now dry. To make some highlights, I will use this Dryad Brown. I'll use it on all the structural wood and around the windows and doors. And the stonework on the walls will also need some highlights, and for that I will use the Ash Grey. I have overpainted a couple of spots with some of the browns, so I will use this deep grey to fix my mistakes. I'll also need to do some edge highlighting, and for that I will use this brighter fur brown. And some greenskin to highlight all the terrain. I think it was a bit too dull in the colors, so I wanted it some more bright green. And to highlight it, I have this Emerald Forest. This is a very vibrant green color and it will just make things pop a lot. And some Prairie Ochre just to highlight the dirt below the greens. I'll not do it much, and a spot here and there will do some magic to the dirt. And the town is now done and ready to serve some heroes and creatures. Centaurs and Centauer captains are level 1 creatures of the Rampart. They are recruited from the Centauer stables. Armed with sturdy spears and possessed of a good speed and attack ratings, the Centauer and Centaur captain are perhaps the best basic foot soldier units in the game. I'll start with a dark wash just to make some more intense shadows on this beast, because we are going to make this horse part white. And then I will use the Gravelord Grey on the base. We are going to do something special in this video with all the miniatures on the bases. I have something planned, but let's get back to that later. And the base color of the skin will be very dark. This tiger eye skin will be the base color of the Centauer's body. And this actual brown will be the shaft of his spear, or is it a halberd that he's wielding here? To make the shadows more intense on his body, I will use this strong skin shade. And after the wash has dried, we can use this topaz skin as a midtone on the skin and just build up the light on the skin with more layers. And another warm skin tone is the amber skin. This will give some more warmth. This is from another triad range, but I think the effect will be pretty good. Let's see how it goes. Now let's build up with this worn stone some of the light and white on the horse part body. And to lighten it up a bit more, I will use this brain matter beige. To lighten up the skin color on the upper body a bit more, I will use this Dorado skin. And for the hair, I will use the brain matter beige. This dude has some hair on his chest that I need to highlight a bit. I'll also use this color for the beard and the hair. And a drop of the brain matter beige into the eyes. And to give it the final touch on the horse part skin, I'll use this matte white. It will only be used as highlights because we can't make it more white than this. On the helmet and the halberd, I'll use this gun metal. And now for some gold effects, I'll use this greedy gold. It's a bit darker than the bright gold from the Army Painter Metallics, and I think it will really suit this model well. I also used some true brass to make some highlights on the gold. And now to paint or decorate the base. I have this crowd cover, which is a new product I just found online, and it's highly recommended almost everywhere. It is a mix of cover to use on bases, and it has a very cool effect. And it is a lot faster to work with than just to paint the bases. And I think it even looks better because it has a more natural look to it. But first, we will need to put on some glue. I used the Army Painter's basing glue, and then I will just sprinkle on some of the crowd cover. This is the Meadows of Purity, and I'll use it in all the models of this faction. It is a mix of static grass and various stones of different sizes and colors, and I think this looks so cool. This is the Centauer captain, and he is now ready to enter the armies of Rampart. Dwarfs and battle dwarfs are the level 2 creatures of Rampart. They are recruited from the dwarf cottage. I'll use the topaz skin as the base color on this battle dwarf. We might as well put some white in the eyes from the start and fix a couple of mistakes where the topaz skin was on the beard. And for his coat, I'll use this evergreen fog. This is a very nice and pale green, and I think this color will work pretty well when we put a wash on top of it later. I missed a couple of spots of the skin color on his arms, but it's easy to fix that. I'll use this dusty skull on the edges of his coat. Now, I'm calling it a coat, but to be correct, I think it's an armor type called a gambeson. I think this bootstrap brown is very suitable for some boots. I think I'll also use it on the handle of the hammer. And some deep gray on his shirt. Resplendent red on the shoulder pads and his belt. And of course the bracers too. Gunmetal for the helmet and the hammer. And to highlight the skin, I will use this tourmaline skin. And now to the gold. I will use this greedy gold for the horns and the helmet and some other tinier details. Before I start using the wash, I will put some more highlights into the beard and hair of this little battle dwarf. Let dry, and then we will use this dark tone, and this time I will just soak the whole miniature into this dark tone. These washes will give you a bit longer work time than acrylics or speed paints, so you have plenty of time to remove stuff if they are puddling up too much in the crevices. I let the wash dry for over 1 hour, and you can see everything is just dulled down right now. And now I will use all the same colors that I have already used, just to make some of the highlights. And first up is the skin of the face. And I'll use the white to make some highlights on the beard and hair. I'll use the evergreen fog for the gambeson, and to edge highlight the edges I will use the dusty skull. Now to the base, and we are using the crowd cover Meadows of Purity as we did on the Centauers. First I'll cover the base in some of the army painter's facing glue, and then I will just sprinkle on the crowd cover on the base. And now this battle dwarf is ready to enter the armies of Rampart. Wood elves and grand elves are the level 3 creatures of Rampart. Armed with bows, elves are the only Rampart units with ranged attack. Grand elves takes 2 shots per attack, so they are a bit upgraded compared to the wood elves. For the skin, I will use this barbarian flesh. I will build up the base colors the same ways as I did with the dwarfs, and then I will give the miniature a wash, and after that I will do some highlighting. I have a lot of colors, but I don't have a very dark gray, so I will have to mix this deep gray and some matte black to give the dark gray that I need for his clothing. Then I'll use the leather brown for his quiver and gloves and other leather stuff on his body. And I will use it on the bow as well. Some gunmetal for the helmet and other metal parts. And then the dragon red for the feathers on the arrows. And then he has a scarf, and that doesn't seem to be on the computer model, so I'll also paint that red. Mithril metallic. This is the most shiny metallic silver paint I've ever worked with, and I will use that for the chainmail. Since I can't see his hair on the computer model, I'll allow myself to some artistic freedom here and use this ancient stone for the hair on this elf, and he might as well be a blonde. Let's make him super blonde with this pale sand and use that for highlighting the hair. We also need some bright gold for this, and a lot of it. The helmet, the armor, the boots, even the bow. All the base colors are on the miniature, and I will use this dark tone, just like I did with the dwarf. I will soak it into the whole miniature. And some Gravelord Grey for the base. I let the wash and Gravelord Grey dry for about an hour, And now I can start to get some vibrance back into the colors by highlighting with the same color as I did for the base color. And some white PVA glue with a brush on the base. And now we are ready to put on some crowd color. And here I will still use the Meadows of Purity. Just sprinkle it on and let it dry. And now this grand elf is ready to enter the armies of Rampart. Pegasi and Silver Pegasi. This model is going to be the most difficult one to paint of this faction. It will be a pain to paint that face, but I will take it as a challenge and do my best to hit all the spots so we can get a pretty face on this rider. But let's see how it goes and start out with this barbarian flesh on the skin. The Pegasi and Silver Pegasi are the level 4 creatures of Rampart. They are recruited in the enchanted spring. Pegasi is winged horses ridden by a female elven warrior. They are the flying cavalry of the Rampart army. Looks like she's wearing a black bikini, so let's paint it black. Well, the model is a bit more dressed up, so let's paint the dress black. I love using this Fire Drake speed paint on brunette's hair, so I will do this for this elven warrior. Now I'll use some brain matter beige for the white in their eyes. It is very difficult to get in there and hit the right spot, and I will probably overpaint. And that's the reason why I'm doing it in this early stage of the paint, because it's easier to fix the overpainting when I only have used one skin color. We also need some metallics, and the gunmetal is my go-to metallic paint for this. And then I used the Fire Drake on the base. I might as well use it because there's a lot of wood parts there, and when I'm putting on the crowd cover, it will still shine through. And I think maybe this is a stone, but it doesn't matter. Stones can be brown, and can always put some dry brush gray on top of it. For the horse's armor, I will use this true brass. This is a very bright silverish gold, and I really like it for this purpose. I'll use this bony spikes for the mane and tail and hoofs on the Pegasi. It kinda annoys me that I painted that stone or rock below the Pegasi, so I will use this tiny dry brush to give it some ash gray. Ruby skin is the next color in line, and it is a bit brighter than the barbarian flesh, so this is to make some highlights on her pretty face. And I will use the true brass to paint her headband and some minor details on the armor. And to get some more deep shadows on the wings and the horse's body, I will use this dark tone. And I will just soak everything into this dark tone, except for the elf on the back of the Pegasi. For her sword, I will use this cobalt metal. It is a silver with a blue tint, and I really love this color because it has such a magical effect. And the challenge is getting even greater, some Arctic gem to make her eyes blue. It was very difficult for me to get good footage of painting the face because my hands were always in the way and the details didn't show on camera. But here's the result of the painted face. Well, this Pegasi should not be grey, it should be white. So I will use a matte white with a dry brush all over the wings and the horse's skin. And fixing some minor details to give it some more highlight. The armor on the horse was a bit dulled down after I gave it a wash, so I will just paint the individual tiles in the armor. And finally, we need some crowd cover, but first I'll need to put some PVA glue on the base and deploy some basing material on the base. And now this silver Pegasi is ready to join the armies of Rampart. It was really a pain to paint that face, and I spent about 2 hours just painting that, doing everything over and over again. But I'm quite satisfied with the result as it turned out. Dendroid guards and Dendroid soldiers are the level 5 creatures of Rampart. Slow but powerful Dendroids bash their opponents with their wooden limbs. I'll use the Fire Drake speed paint to give it a wooden look. This model has some leaves on the branches on the head, and for that I'll start using the angel green as the base color for the leaves. They could have had green eyes, but I decided to use the red just to have a contrast to the green leaves. Some green skin to work my way up through the triad system of the fanatic paints. This will be the midtone for the leaves. And for the second midtone I will use this wild green. It's a bit brighter than the green skin. And some ferocious green for the final highlights of the leaves. The triad system of the army painter's paints is divided into 6 different colors from the darkest to the brightest. I was only using 4 here, and that's just because I don't think it's necessary to use all 6. But it gives you a lot of flexibility. Some Gravelord Grey for the base. After the Gravelord Grey had dried up, I gave it some PVA glue and some sprinkle of crowd cover. I also wanted to highlight the wood, and for that I used the tree ancient, which is pretty suitable for a tree. This was a lot easier to paint than the Pegasi, and I really love the result of it, even though it was easy. Now this Dendroid is ready to enter the armies of Rampart.
For the first time in the history of the contested lands, humans and elves have fought alongside one another to defend the region from invaders. When the celebration is over, old hatreds will return and we will be citizens of a land in conflict. We must think about the future of the contested lands. It is time to shape its future. If our fight for independence is to succeed, we need something greater than our armies to motivate the populace. We need a symbolic cornerstone. Seek out the Grail in the enchanted lands where the unicorns converse with the trees.
Unicorns and war unicorns are level 6 creatures of Rampart. Unicorns and war unicorns have excellent mobility and deliver a severe damage with their lancing horn attack. I want these unicorns to be white, so I will use the brain matter beige and the matte white to highlight the skin on the unicorn. And for this I will use a small dry brush, just so I can get in all the tiny spots. And I want this unicorn to have a gold mane and horn. I will also apply this bright gold with the dry brush. And to give the gold some more highlight, I will use this true brass, also applying it with a dry brush. And some Gravelord Grey for the base. And to give the shadows some more depth, I will use this dark tone. I will not put anything on the unicorn's body, only on the mane and gold parts. The wash takes a while to dry up, so I might as well apply some of the crowd cover. But first we will need some PVA glue on the base, and then I can put on the crowd cover. There is some details in this base that will be exposed, and I will have to paint them later. I want some of the wood parts on the base to be a bit bright wood, so I will use this hardened leather. And this is one of the brightest browns I have as a speed paint. I think the effect is pretty good. A tiny black dot into the unicorn's eye. And stone and white to make the skin a bit brighter and make some touch up where I spilled some of the gold. And finally some dry brushing with the true brass just to brighten up and make the mane a bit more shiny. And this is pretty much it. We now have a unicorn. or actually a war unicorn that's ready to enter the armies of Rampart.
The Ring of Life, the second component of the Elixir of Life, is hidden in the Valley of de Grande. There lives a group of powerful elven nobility, who are the caretakers of several warrens of gold and green dragons. These dragon lords have always been loyal to Avli, but we fear that one of these lords has been corrupted by the necromancers. If this treacherous dragon lord gets the ring before you, he will become an enemy too powerful for the forces of Avli to withstand.
The green dragons and the gold dragons are top tier level creatures of the Rampart. They are the level 7 creatures. Green and gold dragons deliver devastating damage in form of poisonous and sulfurous breath. I'm actually a bit anxious about painting this gold dragon because there's a lot of gold on it and I'm afraid that it will destroy it if I'm using only metallics. But I will start with the bright gold on all the scales. And I must say, there is a lot of gold on this dragon. I have this very dark gold called death metal, and I will use that on the horns and all the claws. I overpainted the scales a bit too much, so now I will have to fix the mistakes after the gold has dried up. To make some more shadows between all the scales, I'll use a strong tone wash. This is not as dark as the dark tone, but it has a more brownish tint to it, and it will work very good on the gold colors on this dragon. I'll also use the strong tone on the wings. And some dark tone on the base. And I'll use the Fire Drake speed paint through my airbrush to make the wings look more like skin. You could apply this with a brush if you don't have an airbrush, but I think the result with an airbrush is just a level up on the skin. And another interesting thing is that the army painter's speed paints actually works pretty good in an airbrush because you don't have to thin anything down and you have full control over the colors. To make some highlights on the skin, I will use this caramel brown. This is an airbrush paint from the army painter, and it is just to make some more highlights. I could have used any other color, but this was what I had in hand. To make the chest a bit more bright, I will paint the individual scales with the true brass. I want the eyes to have a very bright effect, so I will start with a very light gray color and make a follow-up with this rainforest green. And to make it glow, I will use this afterglow. And to finish off the glow effect, I will use a matte white. And the final touch, some PVA glue on the base, and of course, some crowd cover. I'm actually kind of surprised of how good this gold worked. I was a bit afraid of starting up on this, but on the other hand, I could always do it over if I wasn't satisfied. But now this gold dragon is ready to be the part of the army of the Rampart. In the Rampart faction there is 3 might heroes and 1 magic hero. And we have Mifala, Clancy and Gelu. I will start painting the might hero and save the magic for later. I want some deeper shadows on the horse, so I will start with a dark tone wash all over the horse's body. Some hardened leather and fire drake skin to give some variation in all the leather parts on the horse. And some pallid bone on the tail and the mane of the horse. There will be a lot of browns on this miniature, so I will use the ruddy fur on the boots, just to give it some more variation in all the brown colors. And yet another brown color, the dark wood, for the lands with the flag. And the faction color of the Rampart is green. So for the flag, I will use this shamrock green speed paint as the base color. To build up the skin color, I will start with this jasper skin. And for the hair, I will use this palette bone. And for his pants, I will use this camel cloak speed paint. And the gunmetal for the helmet and some armor parts. And then I'll use some shiny silver to highlight the gunmetal and as a base color on the chainmail. And then I will use the strong tone on the rider. And while I wait for the strong tone to dry, I will use this thinned down matte white on the horse's body and some bony spikes on the tail and mane to make some highlights. And after the wash, the skin tone was dulled down a lot, so I will use the jasper skin to start making some highlights on top of it. Some leafy green for the highlights on the flag. We also need some bright gold on the helmet and some details on the armor. Some basic glue from the army painter, and of course the crowd cover. And now this ranger might hero from Rampart is ready to lead his army. This is Gem. She is a magic hero of the faction Rampart. And in this set, she's the only magic hero. She has specialized in first aid. I will use the camel cloak speed paint for her cloak. And some ruddy fur for her leather pants. And some decorative parts of the horse. I will also use some hardened leather for the leather parts. Primarily her boots and maybe the saddle, just to get some variations in the brown colors. And her face will be covered in barbarian flesh. And then I got this stupid idea of painting her clothes in this spellbound fuchsia. I will regret this and do it over later. I will need to add some more browns, so to get some more variation I will use this fire drake for the hooves and some of the leather parts on the horse. And yes, we have another blonde elf with this ice yellow for the hair. And some pale sand for the tail and mane on the horse. Shamrock green speed paint for the flag as I did on the other hero. But I will also use it as a base color for the smoke that's coming out of the horse's hooves. Darkwood speed paint for the lance. This spellbound fuchsia needs to disappear. I will paint it over with the woodland camo. The Army Painter's Fanatic series has such a high pigmentation that I only need to paint it over once, and then the ugly color is gone. I will thin down some strong tone with the wash medium. This is to make a more translucent wash for her face to keep the details. We also need some metallics, and for that I will use the gun metal for all the metal details on this miniature. I found one of my light tones. I rarely use these, but I thought maybe it was a good idea to put it on the mane and the tail of this horse and see how it turns out. I also need to make the horse white, so I will use some thinned down matte white and just use a thin layer on top of the horse's body. The shamrock green speed paint is now dry on the smoke on the horse's hooves. So now I will dry brush this mossy green on top of it to make it more smoke-like. Some PVA glue on the base and some crowd cover. Now this little gem is ready for the battlefield, leading an army for the Rampart. We also need to paint the rims on the bases. The faction color of Rampart is green, so I found this matching color called Leafy Green, and it matches the original plastic color of the miniature pretty good. And the Rampart faction is done. I really hope you enjoyed watching me paint all these. I really enjoyed painting all these miniatures and trying out some new techniques and improve some of my skills. Something went good and something went bad. We don't talk about that magenta color thing. But let's have a closer look how these turned out. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I really appreciate you all being here, and I hope I've earned your subscription if you already haven't done it. And maybe put a like and a comment below. This is it for now, and oh, it's not all about ending now. I have something more I want to say. I have one more faction coming up, maybe within a month or a month and a half, and after that, I actually bought all the rest of the factions myself because I want to show all of you how I paint all the factions of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the board game. Thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.